I want to thank everyone who does put this together. This is my first full year as your mayor, as of about 3 days ago. It is awesome. It gets better every day. I love serving this community, and you make it easy to serve. You're great people, great businesses, and it makes my job really easy. I just get to sing your praises. So thank you for that. I am so much looking forward to hearing our Deputy Chief, Roger Wilkie, speak to us. We also have a very good and close relationship with our Halton Police Service, who keep us safe. Safest municipality and region in the country. That is awesome. So once again, thanks to all of you for everything that you do to make Burlington the #1 city in the country. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Kay, and I'm the Senior Director for Business Solutions with Cogeco Cable. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Deputy Chief Roger Wilkie. He is the Board Chair for the Reach Out Centre for Kids. As a proud resident of the Halton region since 1989, Deputy Chief Wilkie is committed to his community through various volunteer activities, including several years coaching within the Burlington Eagles rep hockey organization. Over the years, he has sat on a number of victim-based committees to enhance service delivery, and he currently serves as the chair of the Executive Board of Directors for the Reach Out Centre for Kids, ROC, a provincial lead agency for child and youth mental health. Roger began his career with the Halton Regional Police Services in 1996, where he served in uniform operations, the drug unit, mobile surveillance unit, homicide unit, criminal investigations bureau, domestic violence unit, and as the executive officer to the deputy chief prior to being elevated to the senior officer ranks in 2014. I didn't know there were so many divisions within the police department. As part of the senior leadership team, Roger has been a district commander for Oakville and the commander of emergency services, training, and human resource services. Roger was promoted to deputy chief in 2018, where he has led several strategic initiatives while overseeing both regional and district operations. Deputy Chief Wilkie believes that the community safety and well-being is a shared responsibility, and is committed to mobilizing and engaging the community and key stakeholders to ensure that Halton Region is as safe tomorrow as it is today. He believes in the importance of collaborative and coordinated service delivery, and was instrumental in the development of the Halton Region's Situation Table and Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, two provincial leading initiatives that truly reveal the power of partnership. Currently, he is leading the service's authentic inclusivity strategy and is involved in the Canadian Association of Police Chiefs Global Studies Program and the Rotterdam School of Management Police Executive Leadership Program. Please welcome Roger Wilkie.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. Back in September of this year, I was up in Ottawa at the National Police Memorial, and there I was having a conversation with Carla Nell and Chief Tanner about an amazing person that I had met months earlier. And that conversation led to us talking about some amazing people in our community who are truly compassionate and want to give back. Well, somehow that conversation led to an invitation for me to speak here today. I told Carla I wasn't much for talking about myself, but I've seriously met some amazing people throughout my career, and it's their stories that I want to share with you here today. And indeed, it's an honor to do so. But before we dive into the lives and experiences that I want to share with you today, I do have a confession to make to you all. Despite the fact that I've been policing since 1996 for 24 years, I unofficially started my police career when I was 3 years of age. So, I grew up in California. My dad was a Baptist minister. My mom was a teacher by education, but I only knew her as the best stay-at-home mom ever. And they really treated me and my brother with a ton of respect and tried to get us into the community as much as we could. And so I think that those principles at an early age really triggered me to want to give back to our community through policing. Now, it wasn't just my parents, because we had a neighbor, his name was Don Perry. And Don Perry was a cop. And he was an amazing role model for me and my brother and all our friends on the street. And no matter what time of day or how tired he was, Don Perry would take the time to call us over, to sit in his car and play with his handcuffs and turn the lights and sirens on. And he hooked all the little boys on the street for wanting to be a cop. But the cool thing about Don Perry was that when he brought you over to the car, you had to sit there and be taught something every time. So there were a number of life lessons and teachings that Don Perry shared with all of our friends, and it really did make a difference in what I wanted to do as a young boy. Now, the thing is, Don wasn't just a regular cop, he was a California highway patrolman. And I can tell you that back in the 70s and early 80s, there was a really corny primetime TV show about the California Highway Patrol. Does anyone know what that was called? Chips. There we go. So, my brother and I and all my friends on the street, we wanted to be Punch and John. And we would ride up and down the streets in our police outfits, and we would protect the streets of California. So much so that Don Perry was so gracious that he took off some patches off of one of his uniforms, and he gave it to my mom, and my mom made me a California Highway Patrol outfit. So, probably second guess myself for showing this photo here with my colleagues, because I'm probably going to get busted, as you can tell. You're welcome, Jeff. So I don't know if that was more embarrassing, or the fact that my parents actually got my brother and I out of the house like this. So my mom thought it was actually kind of funny, and so she would allow my brother and I to go out in public to the grocery store, to restaurants, dressed like this. And I can only imagine what people were thinking. Like, who is this family? And who is that kid wearing a cop outfit? And why is he wearing a motorcycle helmet in the restaurant? So despite my early calling to the profession of policing, I can tell you that there were two incidents in my life as a child where I thought that maybe my dream of being a cop would not come to fruition. And the first one revolves around a McDonald's story. So my mom was super active in the community. She played tons of sports, and so she would be out regularly in the evening. And it turned out that about once a week, my dad was left to his own devices to feed my brother and I. And my dad was very well educated. He was a brilliant man, to be honest. But when he walked into the threshold of a kitchen, it was like he got a lobotomy. And my brother and I got tired of eating bread and apples for dinner. So my dad made up this rule that we would go out for dinner, just the three guys, when mom was away. So one night we went to McDonald's for dinner. And of course I had my handcuffs with me. And we were standing in line, and it was quite busy. So I asked my dad if I could arrest him. And so he was a good sport, and he put his hands behind his back, and I put the handcuffs on him, and we slowly started to move up towards the front of the line to place an order. And he said, okay, let's take the cuffs off, and to both our surprise, I had forgotten the key at home. So they certainly made toys better back then, because it took 3 adults and a pair of pliers to get these cuffs off my dad. And I'll never forget the look on his face and the different shades of red that he turned. I can tell you I ordered a Happy Meal that night, but it really wasn't so fun. The funny part was he still had handcuffs, bracelets on while he was eating his hamburger at McDonald's. So I really thought my career was over then, because my cuffs were broken, but my dad was a good sport. And he went to the toy store later that week and bought me another pair so I could get back to duty. The second incident, and it's a little more in line with why we're here today, actually occurred and involved an ice cream truck. So in California, when you're growing up there, you get up, you get dressed, you have breakfast, and you go outside and you play all day. And really, your parents don't see you unless you're hungry or hurt. And So we had an amazing group of kids on our street, probably 15 to 20 at any given time, where we just played together as a big pack. Football, baseball, tag, cops and robbers, whatever it was, we did it all together. And because we lived in California and the weather was decent, we would have an ice cream truck roll through our community probably once or twice a week. And it was a big deal. And there was actually an unwritten rule where whatever you were playing, whatever we were doing, if you heard the music from the ice cream truck, you would just freeze. And you would look at someone like, are we hearing this? We're hearing this is right. And we would stop what we were doing and everyone would run home and they would raid the piggy bank or ask mom or dad or the babysitter for a bit of money to go and get an ice cream. Well, the funny thing is that there were so many kids on the street that we couldn't always get their first choice because they didn't have enough in the ice cream truck. So we would get our money and we would congregate in the middle of the street. It was a long north-south street. And you had to guess which end the ice cream truck was going to come. And then it was a mad race on skateboards, bikes, sprinting, whatever it was to get first in line. And this one day, the ice cream truck rolled around and it actually parked right in front of my house. And I can tell you that it was exciting because I was closest and I was going to be first in line. And so we boogied down there. There's a lineup of about 15 kids. And while I was in line, I looked over to my right and I noticed that there were 5 kids that were not in line. And these kids were brand new to the community. They had just moved in a day before, and I was trying to figure out why they weren't in line. So I walked over to there was the oldest sister, and I asked her if they were gonna get ice cream. She said, no, we didn't have any money. So I said, okay, well, why don't you go home and get some? And she said, well, we don't have money for that. So I went back to line, I spoke to my friend Mike and Lance and said, hey, how about we scrape together some money and we'll see if we can get an ice cream. We didn't have enough, certainly, to buy all 5 kids. So I remember seeing an envelope of money on the dining room table back at home. And my mom used to sell Shackley, remember like those supplements? And so she sold that on the side to make a bit of spending money. And so without thought, I ran inside the house and I grabbed some money from the envelope and I went back and I gave it to the girl and said, here you go. And they got in line, they were happy. The ice cream truck left, all of us had ice cream, we sat in the curb like we normally did, had our treat, and then went back to playing. So later that night I'm at home, and there's a knock on the door. My mom answers the door, and she's met by the mom of these 5 kids, and she begins to thank my mom for the generosity of buying her kids ice cream. And I could tell my mom doesn't know what's going on, and she's very polite. She says, oh, no problem. She kind of goes with it. And as soon as the door closes, my mom just stared at me and then stared at the kitchen table, and I knew that we were about to have a chat. So my mom began to ask me where I got the money. I said, well, I felt bad for them, and I wanted to just buy them some ice cream. She said, well, where'd you get the money? I said, well, from the dining room table. So she leveraged Officer Don Perry to come over that night and give me a lesson. And I really thought, oh, I'm never going to be a cop now. I'm getting a misdemeanor. But my mom was kind enough that she let me work off the money I'd taken through extra chores. But later in life, my mom told me that despite the bad decision of taking the money, she was actually quite proud of the fact that I had felt sympathy, and I actually cared about kids on our street. And so later, that virtue of compassion, I can tell you as a police officer, there's nothing greater than that virtue when you're dealing with the people that we deal with in policing. So as Chris said, I moved to Burlington in 1989. I went to Nelson High School, where I met my wife. My kids are both there now in grade 9 and 12, and almost one off to university. Crazy how fast time flies. So I went to grade 12 and 13 at Nelson, off to university, and then my dream of becoming a police officer came true in 1996 when I was hired by the Halton Police. And over the past 24 years, I can tell you that I've seen humanity at its worst and at its best. I've also learned so much about the power of collaboration and compassion, and how people like you and I can make such a big difference in our community, each in our unique way. So in preparing some thoughts for today, I wanted to share the idea that compassion is a virtue that knows no age or boundary. And as such, I'm going to share with you 4 short stories about the actions of some amazing people that I've met over the years. So first, I want to tell you about a homeless man that I met by the name of Thomas William. So I was in uniform patrol. It was my first year on the job, and it was a very cold winter night. Sideways snow, minus 30, one of those nights that no one was out on the road. So like after parade, I went and scraped off my car and I started driving around my zone, and there was nothing going on. And as I was driving down the street, I saw what looked to be a body laying inside a bank kiosk. So I circled my car back around and marked myself off on a person inquiry, and I approached the bank. And as I got closer, there certainly was, it looked like a male party laying face down in the bank. So as I walked into the kiosk, I startled this man, and he scrambled back into the corner with his hands up. He was quite belligerent. By the way he looked, he was very disheveled, and the way he smelled, you could tell that he had been on the street for some time. I assured him that I was not there to cause him any grief. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. He began to explain how much he didn't like police and kind of gave it to me for a few minutes. There was no way that he would have survived that night, even in that bank kiosk, because of how cold it was. So I asked him if I could give him a hand to see if we could get him into a shelter. So he went on to explain that he had been on the street for over a year, and he had just landed in Halton region that night. He didn't have any idea of what the referrals or resources were available, so begrudgingly he allowed the cop that he didn't like to give him a hand. So I asked our communications bureau to make a few inquiries to see if we could find him a warm bed and a shelter. And during this conversation, I learned a bit more about Thomas William. That he was an alcoholic, he hadn't seen his family. He was, in fact, a very successful businessman at one point, but his alcoholism got to him and he lost his family and lost everything. But what would happen over the course of the next 2 hours was actually quite remarkable for me as a brand new cop, thinking that I could save the world on my own. As I'm talking to Tom in the kiosk, a man walked in to the bank, and he was just there to make a night deposit. And we moved out of the way, he did his banking, and then left. And a minute later, I noticed that this man was still standing outside the bank like he wanted to talk to me. So I excused myself from my conversation with Tom, and I went and spoke to him. He introduced himself as an independent pizza shop owner from Royal Pizza, and his name was Angelo. And he said that the roads were crap, he was going to shut down for the night, but if I wanted to help give this guy a meal, he'd be happy to stay open. That's pretty cool. Okay, I'll let him know. And so he went back to his business, and I walked in and I spoke to Tom. Tom advised that he hadn't eaten for a couple days and certainly could use the meal, but he was really not one for charity. He was kind of just really fighting it. I told him that the restaurant would be warmer, and I think that's what I got him in the car, and then got him over to Royal Pizza. And when we walked in, Angelo was there. He's the owner-operator with one server, and the reception that they gave Tom was remarkable. Rather than just kind of giving him some leftover lasagna or pizza that was there that they were just going to get rid of, they actually sat Tom on a table, they let him order off the menu, they showed him a lot of respect. And so Tom was a little, questioning what was going on, and he ate his meal, and during that conversation, Angelo said, "Hey, I hope you don't mind, but I called my friend Jim, and Jim is the assistant manager at the Mark's Work Warehouse, and he's willing to donate some clothes if you want to take Tom by." So Tom finished his meal and he nodded. That was his way of saying thanks to Angelo. He wasn't much for words. And we made our way over to the Mark's Work Warehouse. And during that drive over, we learned that there were no shelters locally that we could find Tom a room in. So we began to look outside the jurisdiction to see if we could find something for him that night. When we walked into Mark's Work Warehouse, I was met by Jim, who has to be 6'8", 300 pounds, very jovial. There was no one else in the store. And out of respect for Tom and his situation, he had gathered a bunch of clothes off to the side so that Tom could do his own shopping. Excuse me. I was shocked at how respectful this act was. And Tom went over and he started looking at the clothes, and we really needed to get him the warm clothing because it was just awful that night. Tom walked out that night with a jacket and pants and a sweater and boots and toque and gloves, the whole 9 yards. And Tom was just in shock. He wasn't saying much. And I think I was in more shock, as you can tell from my emotion, because I was like, I thought I was helping this guy by getting him in a shelter, and these people were actually doing the right thing. So as we're leaving, Jim says, hey, I know a girl named Camille, and she works at the Guardian Drugs. And she's got some hygiene products that she'd like to donate if you want to stop by. Well, around that time, we learned that there was a shelter in Guelph that was going to open up a bed for Tom. And so we started making our way that way, and we stopped by the Guardian Drugs. And I met Camille, who was standing outside in the cold with a shoebox full of a shave kit and soap and you name it. Tom did his nod. We got in the car and we started making the long trek in that weather to Guelph. When we got to the shelter, Tom was greeted with open arms by gracious shelter staff, and he was given a hot shower and a warm bed for a few days. And that was the last I'd seen Tom. And I went back to shift, and I circled back around with Jim and Angelo and Camille and thanked them on behalf of the police service for showing compassion. And I was just humbled by the willingness of the local businesses to help Tom. This was a turning point for me in my policing career, as it struck me how important the role we all play in health, safety, and well-being of our community. So here's the best part of the story. Almost a year and a half later, I'm on duty, I'm working a day shift, and now it's the summertime. And I get a phone call to return to the station, as there was a party there to see me. So I went back to the station, and the party was pointed out to me. As I walked up to this male, he had a big smile on his face, and he says, "You don't remember me?" I said, "No, sir, I'm sorry. I meet so many people." He goes, "It's Tom." He goes, "You got me into a shelter a year and a half ago." And I was shocked. This man did not look the same. He was clean cut. He was well dressed. Obviously, his addiction issues had been licked. And he went on to explain that those acts of kindness and compassion by that business community was a game changer for him. And now, most importantly, his faith in humanity had been restored at a time when he needed it most. In reality, it was the business community coming together that inspired Tom to conquer his situation. These amazing people were true catalysts for positive change for Tom, who has since committed his life to helping homeless people, and all it took was for a group of normal people like you and I to identify how they could help in their own little way. I can tell you it was a pleasure to circle back around with Angelo and Jim and Camille. It took me some time to find them, but I told them the great news about Tom and his turn in life. The takeaway for me in all this was that sometimes it's not the large donation or the big news story of philanthropy that make the only difference. Sometimes all that's required is your time and your heart. So my ask of everyone here today is, please don't ever assume that someone else will step up to do the right thing. Don't let that opportunity pass you by. There are many Toms out there that need this simple act of kindness. You never know, it just might change someone's life. So I told you about my perspective as a young kid in California and my small act of compassion at the ice cream truck. But next I want to tell you about an awesome little dude from Burlington named Chase Sandy. Chase Sandy was born in 2005. And in 2010, 4-year-old Chase was diagnosed with nephroblastoma, a cancer that affects the kidneys. Chase's parents, Jeff and Tammy, are dear friends and colleagues of mine, and Jeff's here today. They're both police officers with the Halton Police. So Chase endured several months of intensive interventions, including chemotherapy, radiation, and surgeries. And throughout this very, very challenging time, Chase, Jeff, and Tammy were surrounded and supported by family, friends, and our extended policing community. We quickly learned how most families are unprepared for a crisis like this, unprepared for the unexpected expenses, unpaid leave of absence, hotel costs, parking, meals, loss of income. So in 2014, Chase and his family chose to conquer their challenge and turn this experience into something very positive. Supported by a small group of friends, they formed a nonprofit organization called Chase's Gift. The goal was to raise money to financially assist families during their child's treatment. My wife, 2 sons, and I have had the honor of being a part of this committee since inception, and I've seen firsthand a community come together for an amazing cause. In 2015, the first annual Toonie Auction fundraiser was held in Burlington in support of local families caring for children living with cancer. The initiative is only possible through the support of private and corporate donations, local businesses and restaurants, service industries, and many volunteers who chipped in their own way to help the cause. A bank manager stepped up to be the treasurer and handle the financial piece. Various small businesses leveraged their community resources and contacts to secure donations and services for the annual event. Marketing and media firms stepped up to promote the initiative and increase awareness of how we can all work together to help families who have children with cancer. This truly was and still remains to be a grassroots initiative, and to date, the Chase's Gift Initiative has raised over $175,000. And all that money raised goes directly to families in need when they need it most. Chase's Gift proudly creates backpacks containing gift cards for fuel, hospital parking, and food, and distributes them to over 40 families each year at the McMaster Children's Hospital. In addition, we provide cash donations to several local families each year who require additional financial support and assist kids with an opportunity to go to Camp Trillium. I have had the honor of attending McMaster Children's Hospital on a number of occasions, and I have seen the families struggling and in pain, but I've also witnessed firsthand how Chase's Gift makes a positive impact in these very challenging situations. The great news is that Chase is cancer-free, and he's now a thriving 14-year-old in grade 9 here in Burlington. And throughout this difficult time, the Sandy family was fortunate enough to have the support of family, friends, and colleagues, both emotionally and financially. The Sandy family started this journey when Chase was 4 years of age. The decision to overcome their challenge and give back to other families has made a real difference in so many people's lives. Chase himself has become a role model for so many youth because of his compassion for others and his demonstrated resilience and desire to give back. Through partnerships and collaboration with private, public, and nonprofit sectors, and a unified compassion for families and children living with cancer, the community was able to positively respond to a very challenging situation and deliver support and hope to families and children when they need it most. So many great things come from tragedy, loss, suffering, and challenges. Chase Sandy and the Chase's Gift Initiative clearly demonstrates that everyone can be a leader and conquer anything through collaboration and compassion, no matter what age or stage you are in life. So with that, I'm going to tell you about a remarkable man who at the age of 91 continues to make a difference, someone who has inspired me greatly. This is Max Eisen. In the spring of 1944, Max Eisen, a 15-year-old Hungarian Jew, and his family were forcibly removed from their home, brought to a brickyard, loaded onto crowded cattle cars, destined for the Nazi death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Max survived the selection process with his father and uncle, and was inducted into the camp as a slave laborer. Tragically, his mother and 3 siblings were immediately exterminated upon arrival. After months of extreme conditions and declining health, Max's father and uncle were selected for death. That night, Max stood at a barbed wire fence where he said goodbye to the only remaining family that he had. At the age of 15, Max's father told him that his mission in life would be to tell the world about what happened there in Auschwitz if he survived. Max's father and uncle were murdered hours later, and Max was now all alone in a Nazi death camp at the age of 15. At one point, Max was beaten so bad that he was sent to a camp medical facility. Because of his severe head injuries, he was slated to go to the gas chamber. But by chance alone, Dr. Orzesko, a Polish political prisoner who was enslaved as a surgeon, showed extreme compassion towards Max. He told the guards that he needed a helper in the surgical unit and brought Max under his wing. He employed him there for 6 months, allowing him to heal from his severe wounds. Months later, Max was sent on a series of death marches throughout Europe before being liberated in 1945 when the war ended. Max had survived. At the end of World War II, over 6 million Jews had been murdered during the Holocaust. It took Max several years to regain his health as he moved through transition camps and sought out assistance to get back on his feet. He had no family, no assets, no home. And with the help of many people, particularly in the business community, Max was able to settle in Canada in 1949 and has since devoted his time to the promise that he made his dad. Max wrote a book entitled By Chance Alone. It's a great read, and I would encourage everyone to take that in. It tells his remarkable story of courage and survival at Auschwitz. So in this year, back in July, I traveled to Germany, Poland, and Israel with Max on an educational and leadership journey called Compassion to Action, delivered by the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies. Police leaders, elected officials, and educators from across Canada undertook this life-changing experience with the view of enhancing personal understanding and commitment to hate crimes and the devastation that resulted from the Holocaust. For me, this was a journey of self-discovery aimed at optimizing my daily decisions based on a greater understanding of humanity and a resounding commitment to making my community better. We traveled to significant locations to get a first-hand glimpse of how hatred turned to action and ultimately death for millions. We explored ghettos, death camps, and visited key landmarks where the Nazis planned the extermination of so many people. I had the honor of walking side by side with Max as he personally shared his story with me. I stood with him in Auschwitz at the barbed wire fence line where he said goodbye to his father and uncle. I was moved by the many stories of people who risked everything to help others and save lives. Max, at the age of 91, taught me so much about resilience and the power to overcome and conquer this tragedy by committing to something that was more important than himself. And he's been doing this for 76 years. It was clear that Max could not fulfill the promise that he made his dad to tell this story without the support of the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center and the many public, private, and not-for-profit sectors that fund these types of educational initiatives. Collaboration is the key, having a number of different sectors working together for a common goal. As a police leader, I continue to work with the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center in promoting tolerance, challenging hate, and working towards social justice and Canadian democratic values. Through continued advocacy and education, and supported by people like you, we are making a difference by moving compassion to action, one interaction at a time. Philosopher Dan Dunnett, a passionate advocate for the power of ideas, said, "The secret of fulfillment is find something more important than you are and dedicate your life to it." If Max could have chosen a different life, he would have. Despite how tragic and challenging his life has been, full of loss, he has dedicated his life to making the world a better place by enhancing awareness and understanding of our past. We can all learn so much from Max. So I ask, what are you willing to devote your time and energy to? From a local perspective, it is so very easy to support initiatives, people, and businesses that are socially responsible. I look across this room and I see so many familiar faces. It's great to see people. And I see people that want to give back. You should all be very proud of yourselves. It's such a blessing to live in a community where people care. Now, I may not be a business owner, but I do have the responsibility and privilege of serving over 600,000 customers each and every day as a police leader. And the Halton Police are no strangers to partnering with our community, and we have learned firsthand how critical it is to collaborate. For we are much stronger and impactful working together than as individuals. So 75% of the calls that we go to in the Halton Police are rooted in social disorder. mental health, addictions, homelessness, unemployment. Since 2013, I've had the privilege of playing a role in the development of two critical initiatives in Halton. Our situation table model to identify and address situations of acutely elevated risk, while the community safety and well-being plan focuses on multi-sectoral collaboration, systems leadership, and a commitment to coordinated service delivery to meet the needs of our diverse and growing community. Each year, the Halton Police respond to over 3,500 calls for crisis regarding mental health. And as such, I've always felt a calling to do something more than I can in my policing role in the area of mental health. So in 2016, I began to volunteer with the Reach Out Center for Kids, known as ROC, as a member of the board of directors. ROC is the lead agency for child and youth mental health services in the Halton region. But they're also a leader in the province for innovative, client-centric service delivery and programming. And in 2018, I was blessed with the opportunity to become the chair of this executive board. And in this role, I have been able to lead a dynamic executive team, some of which are here today, through a transformative strategic planning process that now aligns with the Halton region's overarching community safety and well-being plan. Within this context, I'm going to share one last story with you about another amazing Halton citizen who I had the opportunity to meet earlier this year. We're going to call him John, because he's not one for the limelight. So this spring, John came to our headquarters to meet with Chief Tanner and I about how he may be able to support the Halton Police. And during our chat, the conversation moved to his personal life. I learned that John and his family had been deeply impacted by mental health. In fact, 2 family members had died by suicide, and his life had been turned upside down. I could tell John, although a very successful businessman, was still grieving from his great loss many years prior. At the end of our meeting, I walked John out of headquarters, and we jumped on the elevator and we went from the 4th floor down to the lobby. And during that elevator ride, I began to tell him about my involvement with ROC and why I chose to give my time and energy to the mental health sector, thinking that that might be something for him to get closure in what he had experienced. John asked many questions, trying to make sense of his personal tragedy and fully understand the scope of mental health crisis in our community. I explained the importance of focusing on upstream social development measures to help people, especially children and youth, before their issues become crisis, before people die from suicide. John was intrigued, and we actually continued our conversation in the lobby for over an hour that day. He stated that he'd been looking for a way to overcome his grief and pain, and he wanted to give back, but he didn't know what that looked like for him. Well, I invited John to attend the ROC office with me, where we could do a deep dive on what was going on in our community. And I introduced him to our executive team. He asked many questions. He wanted to understand our model of delivering mental health services. During this conversation, he challenged us to reframe our model without barriers, without resourcing issues, without worrying about sustainable funding. Basically, a utopian mental health strategy, if you will. What I did not know at the time was that my elevator pitch to John about mental health service delivery would lead to what is likely the world's largest donation to mental health ever. I truly believe that John and I intersected that day for a reason. John wanted to give back, but needed help to guide his activities and contributions. I learned so much from my encounter and my subsequent friendship with John. The first, don't ever pass on an opportunity to advocate for something that you believe in. Secondly, never underestimate a person's desire or ability to contribute and give back. And lastly, collaboration and compassion are a powerful combination for conquering anything. John's desire to collaborate with ROC and our community and turn his compassion for those suffering from mental health into action resulted in what I can only describe as a game changer for ROC and for the people in the Halton region. The Burlington Chamber of Commerce is the voice of business, giving companies and our community valuable resources to help them grow and succeed. The Chamber can connect leaders, identify opportunities for collaboration, and focus resources on making our extended community healthier and more socially responsible. Community safety and well-being is a shared responsibility. You have all taken time to be here today because you care about what happens here, and I want to personally thank you for that. Today I've told you about some remarkable people who have committed to making the world a better place. So much of what they have done is the result of being compassionate, driving positive change, and working with others to achieve great things. Thomas Williams' life changed because of small acts of kindness from people working at local businesses, strangers. These acts of compassion ultimately renewed his faith in humanity and turned his life around. Chase's gift is able to help families and children by collaborating with local businesses, hospitals, and countless volunteers, and mobilizing our community to action. Max Eisen and the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center model the way for all of us to stand up for what is right and dedicate our life to something that is greater than ourselves. This lesson knows no boundary and is relevant at every age and stage in life. Lastly, do you know someone like John who is looking to give back but doesn't know how or where to start? Can you be that catalyst? Can you give that elevator pitch with the view of creating a spark in someone to turn compassion to action? Folks, I've enjoyed spending time with you here today. I'm going to leave you with one last thought. The future is not yet written. We are all collectively in the process of writing it each and every day. There's a blank page waiting for your contribution. Now go find that fulfillment by committing to something that is more important than yourself. I promise you, you won't regret it. Thank you.